All right. Well, we have a demo lined up next with Kade up in Ontario. He's going to do a bottle stopper or two. So, without further ado, let's go to Canada and see what's happening in Kade's shop. What he's getting ready to turn.
Sweet. Hi, everyone.
Hey,
Thanks for
Kade.
having me.
Hi, Kade.
Today I'll turn a bottle stopper for you guys and girls. So I have a couple here I'll show you first. So here's a few I made. I made this a few weeks ago. This one is made out of Banksia nut. The finial is Pau Amarillo, red palm, and Pau Amarillo. These three pieces were offcuts of pens and finials. So if you save your offcuts, you can always use them to add a splash of color to any sort of piece, whether it's a bottle stopper or a finial. And then for a little bit of practice, I did this one out of, this one is made out of sapele. This one is made out of acacia. I had a friend who did his kitchen cabinets in acacia countertops, and he gave me all the offcuts. So I have quite a bit for bottle stoppers, boxes, finials, and I made him a couple of things too. Here's one in apple. Now this has a little piece of live edge on one end, and then as I turn it around, it has some white leopard-like spalting on the other side. So that's one I did today for a little bit of practice. And I did this one just before I logged on. This one is made out of ash. And the finial on the inside is also made of ash. It's just dyed red and black. So you can make them as fancy as you like or as simple as you like. Your imagination is endless. I usually make them up as I go. So I have a couple pieces of wood here prepped, and we can sort of pick. I have a piece of acacia, which we could turn, or we could turn something colorful, or a piece of walnut, or a piece of cherry.
About the colored one.
I say
Colorful?
colorful too. Colorful.
Yeah,
colorful.
let's say color. It's
Okay,
blank.
we'll
Yeah,
have some
how
color in
about
our
your
life today.
Yeah.
So I'll do that one today. So first I'll talk a little bit about safety and preparing our materials. Now, bare minimum, whenever I turn, I wear safety glasses. I also wear earplugs because wood turners often go deaf, especially in their left ear, due to the sound of the motor. What? The sound of the motor is the chatter of the tool. So I like my hearing. I wear custom earplugs. It's about $150 for the pair, significantly less expensive than one hearing aid. So protect your hearing. You can also see I'm not wearing any rings, bracelets, watches, anything that can pull me into the lathe. If it were to catch one of those corners, it could be drastically devastating or painful if it pulled you in. So no rings, watches, chains, long hair tucked away, protect your face. I also do recommend wearing a full face shield. It doesn't really depend on your experience because you never know if there is a bark inclusion, a void, a crack inside that timber. And the centrifugal force can pull that crack apart, and then you have pieces of wood flying through the air. Now, something even as small as a bottle stopper, if I'm turning this at around 3,000 RPMs, if this were to come off the lathe and hit you in the face, it would hit you at roughly 100 kilometers an hour. So protect your face. Always wear a face shield, if not bare minimum safety glasses. But I always recommend wearing a face shield, even as small as a bottle stopper, especially live edge work, thin work, hollow forms. But it is beneficial to use it all the time because you never know what can happen. Now I'll talk a bit about preparing our material. Also, you can see I'm wearing closed-toed steel-toe shoes. Turning flip-flops or sandals, because even if something this small fell from my bedway, which is 3.5 feet off the ground, if that corner hit my foot, it could break some of those very tiny bones in your feet. So at least closed-toed shoes, if not work boots, okay? Now, when I prepare my material is prepared. It really depends on what length I'm going for my bottle stopper. So if you ever look at, say, the Bria or the Penn State or the Woodcraft instructions that might come with your bottle stoppers, it says roughly 3 inches, 2 inches by 2 inches. But if you want to make it a little longer, you can do 3.5 inches, 4 inches, whatever size you like. The only crucial measurement is what size you make that hole and what size you tap the threading so it matches the threading of your bottle stopper, okay? So my material here are all cut to 2 by 2 square and varying lengths from 2.5 to 3 to 3.5. This one I bought, and this one is probably 1.75 inches, maybe. Let me see. No, 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches by 3 inches long. And I bought this at the local wood turning shop. So you can buy them in bulk, cut them to size, or you can buy them in bottle stopper blanks. Okay? Now, when we turn a bottle stopper, there's many different ways to do it. I'll show you the way I do it, but I will also talk a little bit about other ways that may arise or other things you might have to do to turn the same piece. Okay, so this piece is cut perfectly square. So as long as I have a chuck that will hold this piece perfectly square, I can stick it right in the chuck and get turning. But if I have something irregularly shaped or not quite square, I would use my spur drive, which would go in my chuck. I would first find my centers. I would grab my center finder, and I find my centers on all 4 corners. I do that on all 4 corners just in case it's not perfectly square. We split the difference, and I know that is dead center, and I do this on both sides. I would then put that between centers. I would turn a tenon. I would then put that tenon into my chuck, and then I would drill and tap the hole, which I will show you today. But all these pieces are perfectly square. They are cut perfectly square for a reason, so I actually skip a step. I save a little bit of time rather than going between centers, turning this round, creating a tenon, taking it off, flipping, putting it in the chuck, tightening my chuck, and then drilling the hole. Now, if this is perfectly square on both sides, I could take this to the drill press, find my centers, drill my hole, and then I can come back and put it in the chuck and I can tap that hole. But I don't really want to walk over to my drill press when you can do it all on the lathe, okay? So I'll show you how to do it all on the lathe. Okay, so I'll take this piece, I'll move these pieces. These will be a couple different things, maybe a few boxes, maybe some eggs, maybe some more spinning tops. I was busy this morning. I did a little warm up, turning a couple tops, and a couple tops turned into 50 tops, which is okay because I had to restock one of my shops anyway. And spinning tops are also a great way if you do festivals. if you do festivals, have a bucket of these out front of your tent with a little bowl so all the kids can spin these in your bowl. Once the parents buy these for their kids just to distract them, or maybe they're yelling, screaming, crying, they want something, it's an impulse buy. But at that point, they're in your tent and now they see your stuff and they're shopping for themselves. So a little bit of consumer psychology. And sometimes this will pay for your tent. Everything else is gravy or dinner, okay? Now, whenever I use this chuck key, my hand is always on this chuck key. If my chuck key is in my chuck, my hand never leaves that chuck key. Because you don't want to get doing something, forget that's there, come back, start the lathe, and now we have an anti-tank round of steel flying through the air. So my rule of thumb, what was instilled in me by my mentors and I instill in my students, is hand on the chuck key, it's in the chuck, it stays on the chuck key. The only time my hand comes off this chuck key is when it goes right back on my workbench, okay? Now I'm using a one-way stronghold chuck today with number 2 jaws. So it holds that square perfect for me. Now I always tighten both holes. You want to make sure that's tight because that's what's going to keep that little piece on the lathe and not flying through the air. Now I'm going to remove my tailstock for now because I'm going to true up this face, drill my hole, tap my hole, and then I will stick it in my turning mandrel, and then I will turn that round. Now I suppose you could turn this round right now if you like, and then true this up and drill the hole, but there's many ways to skin a cat. So this is the way I do it. And now I'm at the point where I'm about to start my lathe, so my face shield goes on. Now I set up my tool rest, 45 degrees to that corner. I always spin the piece of wood because I do not want any corner to hit that piece of wood when I start the lathe. Remove your tailstock because we don't want to hit that lovely pin that is on our live center. It's not so funny when that hits our funny bone. You might have some choice words. So take that out and avoid a little bit of pain. Okay. Always give this a spin. I start my lathe at a slow speed. I guess I better turn it on first. That might help a little bit. Now, I start at a slow speed and I ramp up to a speed that I feel comfortable turning at. Now, what's a safe speed? A safe speed is a speed that you feel comfortable turning at. Might not feel comfortable turning at a Jimmy Clue's speed or my speed, but turn at a speed that's comfortable to you, okay? Now, first thing I need to do is I need to true up this face so my bottle stopper sits flat against that base of my bottle stopper. And I'm going to do that with my Irish grind or Ellsworth grind bull gouge, okay? Now I have my tool rest is a little bit high because I'm above that center point. So shut the lathe off. It's okay to move the tool rest, but shut the lathe off because you won't have any surprises, okay? Now I am at that center line where I want to be cutting. I'm using a gouge, so my tool rest is below center, so I'm cutting at center. And since I'm using an Ellsworth gouge, I'm cutting with that bottom wing, riding the bevel on the nose of my tool. Okay? And I just enter, and I come across flat, truing up that surface.
Never not look.
So I have a flat surface for my bottle stopper to sit up against. If I make that slightly concave, that's okay. Okay?
You had to do what you had to do.
But we want that to be flat. Now this was sold as a bottle stopper blank, so I'm probably pretty sure it's flat. But you never know, so it's always good practice to make sure.
Nice
And then you
too.
won't have the headache of coming back
Good time.
and making sure again.
Somebody needs to mute themselves. We're hearing other people.
There we are. Grab my
Thank
ruler
you,
again.
Brenda.
Was there a question there? I heard.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to mute everybody, and then you need to unmute yourself. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. So now I have a flat. I have a slight. There we are. That's okay. I saw that I was muted. Thanks for muting everybody, Dane. So now that I have this flat, I do have a slight concave in the very center, but that's okay because that's where I'm going to drill that hole. And I'm going to tap that hole. So we want that to be flat or slightly concave. It's flat, concave, maybe a ½ inch in the very center. Now what I do, remove my tool rest. I bring up my live center again, pop this in place, and I come in, lock my tailstock down, and I just plunge the point of that in to the piece. Now you can see I have a pilot hole where my drill bit is going to start and not wander on me. Now, what size hole do we drill with? I use a 5/8 drill bit. You can use a 21/64 or a 23/64 is what I believe Penn State recommends. But those are actually smaller than 5/16. So by using 5/16, I get a little bit of a thicker, stronger thread. So I use 5/16. I tap with a 3/8 inch tap, 16 teeth per inch, which matches the threading on my bottle stopper. Okay. Now the bottle stoppers I'm using today are Ruth Niles bottle stoppers. I probably bought them maybe 10 years ago. And I finally turned my last one will be today. So I might have to get some more. So these are stainless steel. They will not get ruined or marked or marred with the acidity of red wine. Sometimes if you use the gold plated or the chrome plated or rose gold plated, the plating can wear off with the acidity of your wine. So I recommend stainless steel, okay? If it's going to be for red wine. If it's for white, a little less acidic, you can probably get away with the plated. Or if it's just a gift, something to look at, the plated ones are very nice, okay? So now when I drill this hole, I drill the hole about 1 inch into the blank. Okay, because I need to tap this hole. And when I tap this hole, the first 3/8 of the tap is tapered. And it doesn't even connect contact the wood. So it really contacts the wood back here to create your threading. So I drill it an extra 3/16 of an inch than they tell you to in the Penn State instructions. So I drill an inch deep. Okay, now when we're drilling, you want to drill at a slow speed because we're drilling through the wood, we're not burning through the wood, okay? If we're traveling too fast, the drill bit will heat up, the wood can expand, grab your drill bit, grab the wood, and then outfeed your Jacob's chuck, okay? Now, you don't want that to happen because if this gets lodged in the wood, feeds itself out of the tailstock, this will start whipping around, and again, we might have an anti-tank round flying through the air, okay? This happened to a friend of mine. It came around and whacked him right across the wrist. He was lucky he was only bruised, okay? So when we drill, we lock down our tailstock. When we start to drill, we do not have the drill bit in contact with the wood because we don't want it to start and jump or start and burn. We want it to spin freely before we start drilling. That way the drill bit can follow that pilot hole. But more importantly, always keep one hand on your Jacob's chuck as you're drilling and outfeeding that drill bit to make sure it doesn't get lodged in that hole and become airborne, because it could be hazardous. Okay. Now I'm drilling between 2 and 500. Now what you can do is you can mark your inch line on your drill bit. I already have a line on here because I did a couple bottle stoppers today, but I would take my tape measure and I would mark this roughly with a pencil to give me a line so I know I have a reference where I need to stop. So here's my reference line right here. So I will drill to that point. Now, you could drill this all in one, but you might heat up the drill bit, expand the wood, grab the tool. So I usually like to drill it in 2 passes. Okay. Bring it up so the tip of the drill bit finds that pilot hole. Don't just slam it in there and start drilling because it might pop off and you might not be centered. Now we're in contact, we're in that pilot hole, proceed to drill halfway. Remove any sawdust that might build up within the drill bit. Now that usually only happens if you're drilling at a high speed because the wood heats up, compacts, gets hot, sticks in there like glue, and you have to flick them out. But it didn't because I only drilled half. I'm turning at a slow speed suitable for drilling. Now I proceed to drill to my depth, and I come out just as fast as I drilled inwards. Okay. I did not heat up my drill bit, and it's not full of compacted, heated up, burnt sawdust. So this will stay sharp, and that will stay the proper size hole that I wanted to drill. Now I need to tap that hole. So I have a 3/8 inch, 16 teeth per inch threads, okay? Make sure when you start threading that this is straight and parallel to that hole. Now, not this rod because we can see it's not parallel, but I want the threader itself to be parallel, which we can actually see within my bed waves. So it's actually beneficial to have a camera when you do this. There we go. So I hold this stationary and I plunge it in and I turn the piece by hand. Don't turn your lathe on because this will thread bottom out and this would be flying like a plane propeller. You don't want that to happen. So we go in straight, parallel, and I turn this as I enter. Now you want to watch to stop when, watch the threads here and stop when it stops going in. It means you're bottomed out in the bottom of those threads. Now, if you're bottomed out in the bottom of those threads, we don't want to keep threading this because we're going to actually strip those threads. And we can see in this position, I threaded that hole straight and parallel to my bedway. So I know that that's straight and my hardware will sit flat, okay? Here, now just plunge this out. Now I don't think I went deep enough there. Just gonna double check how deep I am. Yep, I didn't get in there deep enough yet. So we'll do this again. There we are. And now we're threaded. Now double check, you can double check the threading with your mandrel. And I stripped the threading. So,
Jay, have you ever put super glue on the threads or something to thread it, or used any other taps? Because I make three different taps, a bottoming tap and different tapers on the taps.
pardon?
Have you tried putting super glue on it to help the threads when you're tapping?
No, I haven't really tried that before I tap the hole, but that's a great idea. Usually I use really hardwoods, so I don't have that problem. But that's okay. I can still salvage this. I'm in that deep. But that's okay. That'll be the top, and I'll create a finial. Okay? So I can still use this nice colorful piece of wood.
They sell inserts to repair the threads.
Yeah, you can buy inserts to thread it. All right, grab my drill again here.
A lot of the time I'll drill it, tap it, run thin super glue in it, let that dry, and then re-tap it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Mr. Party said about letting it dry.
Yeah, you have to let that super glue dry because you don't want to glue your mandrel on.
Well, or you might want to, or it might re-glue your tap into your piece of wood.
Purpose really of having it on screw. I usually glue mine on.
I was about to ask that, Brenda. I was wondering whether it was just a cross the water thing.
I've noticed that some spectral ply strips out very easily compared to others.
It is a plywood.
Oh, I drilled my hole. I'm quickly going to face the piece here so I know that it's perfectly flat. I'll try that trick here. Throw some super glue up in here.
When you go to align your tap, if you'll put your tail center point to the dent in the end of your tap, it'll align it perfectly.
I didn't hear any of that, sorry.
When you go to align your tap, if you'll put the point on your tail center to the dent in the end of the tap, it'll line it up perfectly with your hole.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a good tip too.
Then use an open-end wrench to turn the tap instead of the bar stock wrench.
One more shot for good luck. Make sure it's not going to stick my tap in there. There we are. That's just gumming up like no other in there.
I always mark my tap like I do my drill bit.
There we are, it's tapped. And that will tap it the rest of the way. Just in case it gets caught, we got one of these guys.
Primarily, you just got to get the starter thread started like Kade did there, and then the mandrel will tap itself.
Yes, now I've started it, I've tapped it about halfway. Now when I flip and stick that on the mandrel, it will tap itself. Now I'm holding my chuck stationary and I'm turning the back wheel so I don't strip the threads of my my tailstock spindle. I had a bit of a brain fart there for a sec. All right. Oh, that's the wrong one. So now I can hold this in place and I can thread it on the rest of the way. The mandrel will tap those holes the rest of the way. Now when we do this, we want to make sure that our mandrel is flush and flat with the surface of our mandrel. That way it will sit flat within the hardware. Okay.
Which will provide the torque of holding power.
I'm just going to grab my cone here, which will go into that hole. And that will become a small finial, so that's okay. It's still good. It's just a design opportunity. And now we have modified the design to accommodate our mess up.
Also called a skill builder.
Yeah, and we made Kim Tippin happy by not having scrap wood.
You did that on purpose to show us what can go wrong.
Pardon?
You purposely stripped the threads to show us what can go wrong.
Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah, thanks.
I think you did to make the rest of us feel better.
Well, before the challenge this month, I mean, I hadn't made a bottle stopper in probably 10 years. So the 5 I've done, have really been fun and a skill builder all over again. So now we have this between centers. We need to make this round. Now you can use whatever tool you see fit. I'm going to use my roughing gouge just to get this round as fast as I can. So my tool rest is below center. I am cutting with my gouge at that center line. It's locked into my hip right here. And I just move my body back and forth. Now this is a spindle roughing gouge, right? Not a bowl roughing gouge. Never use this on a bowl. Now we have this round. Now we can start our our design. Now, first of all, I'm going to taper this to the bottle stopper blank so my hardware fits flush. I could do a bit of a bead. I could do a bead with a cove and then a bead. I could do a small cup or a dish here into a bead here. And then our finial will go on top there, okay? Now you can use whatever tool you like. I'm going to use my trusty 1/2 inch skew. So since I'm using this skew, my tool rest needs to be above center. So I'm cutting above center. But if we were looking at this camera and this was a clock face, straight up and down is 12 o'clock, right about here is 11 o'clock. And that is where I want to be using my skew. Okay, so my tool rest is in the right position for this diameter of stock.
Hey, Kate, touch on your tool presentation angle.
Pardon?
Touch on your angle presentation for the tool. 35 to 45 degree angle presentation.
Yeah. Okay. So skews are 70 degrees, 25-degree bevel on either side. My skew has a slight radius, but when I do a planing cut, I would be riding across the timber at 11 o'clock here. So the cutter is presented to the tool at 45, and the tool is 45 degrees on the tool rest. That is if I have my toe up and my heel down. You can also do this with the heel up and the toe down, but that angle changes. So now my cutting angle is 45. This is more like 30 degrees, 25-ish.
Perfect.
So I am cutting, planing across in that fashion. Now, whenever I do beads, coves, valleys, V-cuts, planing cuts, you are always only using the bottom third or this bottom third. If I'm using the tool with the toe up, I am cutting with this bottom third in this position. If I am using it with the toe down and the heel up, I'm cutting in this position, and again, only the bottom third. Now you can creep up to that halfway point, but you don't want to creep past the halfway point because I am presented on this corner, directly supported on the tool rest to be using that tool in this position. If I creep past center and I start using the tool on this position, that will catch, slam down like that, and give you a very violent catch because I transferred the weight, the cutting weight or the cutting portion to a portion of the tool that wasn't directly supported by the tool rest. So it slammed down, caught that corner, twisted up. Now it is supported in that position to make that cut there. If I wanted to cut there, we flip the tool and we cut in that bottom third. Okay? So I'll show you that planing cut here and present it at a 45.
No, go. They said they're doing it at the same time. I'm in the shop doing my work.
I'm getting a lot of dust because this is glued veneer. So it's mostly glue. But if this was solid wood, I would be getting very long, stringy, fine angel hair. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut this down in a cove so I become flush with my hardware. Whoop, I presented that too quickly and I wasn't on my bevel, so it skated back on me. Now, why do we get those skateaways? Is because I'm coming across and you lift that tool up off the bevel, oh, it skates away in that direction.
Doug
If I
Moore, pay
stay
attention to that,
on my
Doug.
bevel, I won't get that skate away. It will also happen in this direction too. Stay on the bevel, creep up off the bevel, oh, skate. Okay, so that's why you get that beautiful spiral design we all love to hate. You creep up off that bevel onto a curved blade, which is cutting a curved piece of wood, so it shoots backwards towards that curve. Okay, does that make sense? Now I have this flush. Now I can start thinking of design. So I'm going to do a cup here. I'll do something like this. Okay. So first off here, I'll start with a V cut. Here we are. Make a little small V cut in here for a little bit of style or design. There we are. Now this will be a bead. This will be a cup and then a bead and then a bead and a bead into a cove. So that will be where my cove is. Okay. So now I'll start off with the cup, the bead, the smaller bead, and I'll do that last. So it's starting to take shape. Okay. Now if I do a V cut, I enter V cut, leave it in that position, bring it back 45, enter 45 in the opposite direction, enter, and we have two perfect V cuts on either side. If you have difficulty creating those perfect beads, you can create a center line for reference. Okay, and we start. And we roll over and around the corner. Okay. We roll over and around that corner. Okay. Now over here, I'm going to do a series of V cuts because I want the cup to be the biggest in diameter. There we are. Now there's our cup. I'm going to reduce this diameter because I don't want the bead the same size, or the cove or the smaller beads to be the same size. That's just rough, getting material out of the way. I'll clean up that surface here and here. There we go. Now I'll clean up my bead here. Enter with the toe, stay on that bevel, and curve up and around that corner. There we are. Now we'll fix it. Just fix this side so it matches. There we are. There. Now we'll refine this so I have a hemisphere. There we are. Now we'll do a smaller bead here. A little bit of a V cut here to separate the other bead. There we are. Now you can make a center line if you like. There. Now I have my cup, my bead, there we are. Now I can create the bead and the small cove in the center. I'll start with 2 small beads here. There we are. Another just refine that connection right there. Now all I need to do is do the center part of that little bead and cove. Okay. Now
go
you
too
can
small
do
because you got a
this
hole
with
there.
a skew, but there are many other tools that are better suited for the job. I'll start it with the skew here. Now I'm using my toe, and I am cutting in with my toe and scooping across to create that cove. Now it is possible with the skew, but there are other tools that are better suited for the job just to clean up that bottom area. So I'll grab my spindle gouge. There we are. That's pretty good. I'll just refine this one to match. Now you could do all these beads with this tool too. We just curl up and around the corner just like so. Just like that. Start high, curl the tool up and around. Create that bead, that tight corner. And all my cuts were downhill. So I cut from the high side to the low side, high side to the low side, the high side of this to the low, high side to the low. All my cuts were downhill because this is spindle orientation. So we have end grain here and end grain here. So in order to cut downhill, here we are, I have my end grain orientation. Or if this was a spindle, we have our end grain running in this direction. So you see, I start at the high side of the bead and I cut downhill. So when you cut downhill, the fiber underneath supports the fiber above it being cut. So you get a really nice finish straight off the tool. Cutting downhill, supported cut gives you a nice finish. But if I were to try and cut uphill here from the low side to the high side, I would be cutting uphill. So this fiber separates, cuts, which gives you that tear out and the headache of sanding. Okay. And that is the bottle stopper there. So now I'm just going to clean up this surface to prepare for our finial. Now if I were to sand this, you don't want to sand it right now because all the different colors will bleed into one another. So I would hit this with super glue and then sand. That way the dye doesn't transfer to the other colored wood. You can also hit it with an oil. Sometimes that helps. Or if you get a nice enough finish right off the tool, you could just throw your finish on there right away. Okay. So I'm going to hit this with a little bit of oil. Now this is mineral oil. No, not mineral oil. It is mineral spirits and tung oil. 50-50. That looks pretty good, pretty vibrant.
Well,
I think I'm going to leave it straight off the tool. The only thing is, I have a small little hiccup here and a hiccup here that I need to refine with the tool. So I have no sanding. So this corner was a little chipped. So I'm just going to clean that up. This has a tool mark in the curve. Oh. There we are. And I have a little bit of a bump. Right there as I come up and around. Up and around that corner. There we are. There. There. Much happier with that. and I don't see those tool marks. So rather than sand that color into one another, this is a good case where you don't even need to sand with the skew. Because if I did, all those colors would mash into one another. And if I started sanding that, I could probably start sanding and finish sanding at 320. But with good skew practice and control, you don't need to sand. You can get a good finished surface right off the tool. All right, so I'm just going to pop this out. And I'm going to clean up this surface. You can also dish that out like a bowl, if you like. I suppose I could do that, a little bit of that. Need to remove your tool rest and your live center so we don't kiss our elbow. And since this is veneer all glued together into a brick, we don't really have a grain direction or grain orientation. If this was end grain, I would cut from the inside outwards. You can also get away with light cuts cutting from the outside inwards if it's mostly glue, which is in this case. But if it was end grain, I would be cutting from the inside outwards, which would be a downhill cut. Now I need to take light cuts because I am only contacted here with the friction fit of my mandrel. So if I cut from the center outwards, you can almost actually, cutting outwards and downhill, I would pull that mandrel out of my spindle, which actually happened with this piece. So I actually needed to cut very carefully uphill into the end grain, which is possible, but not recommended if you ride that bevel and take very light cuts.
Can you secure that mandrel with the drawbar?
And by cutting this way, all that pressure is actually keeping that mandrel in my spindle. Okay. There we are. I'll take a quick peek. Yep, that looks pretty good. Just one more pass. Yep, one more pass. Just gonna clean up that. There we are. Try that again. There we are. I have my flute open too much. It caught that wood and shot me back towards the rim. So I just needed to clean up that surface slightly. And there we have our cup. Yep.
Now,
Now
Eddie,
you
you may
can
want to
do
ask
a
the
light
question
scrape
again.
with that bottom wing. That's why I love this tool so much. It's a cutting tool and a scraper all in one. I don't need to reach for my round nose scraper because this curve right here is my round nose scraper. Okay. I'm lightly going to sand in here because I want to clean up that hole that's going to take my finial. There we go. And even that light sanding, the color did not transfer excessively to the surrounding wood. So if you start with a high grit, if you get good surface off the tool and you can start with a really high grit, you're going to get far less bleed than if you start with a rougher, coarser grit, because that's going to open up those pores that much more. This is almost sanding and burnishing those pores closed at the same time, keeping the color where it needs to stay. Okay. There we go. Now we have our bottle stopper complete. Now all we need to do is get this off without making it dirty with dirty hands or dropping it on the floor. So I grab my router mat and I wrap this around the piece so my filthy hands that are covered in tan and woods from turning all day will not ruin or change the color of that auto stopper. Wow, that's really nice. I might not, I don't know, if I show the wife, she might keep it. I won't get to sell it. But, so I hold this, wrap it around the piece, and I turn this, the back wheel of my mandrel, so I unthread my threads. Now I take finish, and I pour a little bit of finish in there. Hopefully it doesn't go on my lathe. There we are. Oh, of course it does, because I forgot that that hole went all the way through, remember? That's okay. I'll just grab a quick rag here. That's all right. It used to be pristine. All right, and now we have our bottle stopper. All nice, bright colors, not sanded into one another. Even when we sanded the inside, oh, my oil is all over the place there, so I'll just put this here and get in here. There we are. And even with sanding, we still have bright, vibrant colors that didn't bleed in to one another. Okay. Now the reason I put the oil through the center too is when the mineral oil evaporates, leaving the tung oil behind, it will also strengthen those threads so they won't get stripped from putting my hardware in and out. But I will also hit that with CA glue before I sell it. If I am leaving this where the bottle stopper can go on and off, I will stabilize those threads with, yes, it's mineral spirits and tung oil, 50-50. It's not mineral oil because mineral oil never dries. So there's our bottle stopper, and now we'll just do a quick little tiny finial, and I'll color that. That will go in the top. And it will be sort of similar to this guy. Maybe a little different finial. Or we could hand turn the sphere. Let me see. I gotta put that somewhere it doesn't roll and fall on the floor. Okay, now I just need to get my knockout bar and knock out my mandrel. Hold on to it because you don't want it coming out hitting your bedway. Open it up for rust. Or if you leave your nice fancy piece right there in the line of fire, you don't want it to hit that piece that took you so long to finish and sand. Now my finial, I have my piece of ash left over from the finial I did earlier for the ash bottle stopper. So I'll throw that in there. Any questions so far? Or I can answer them all at the end, either way.
Okay, what turn is this?
One, I think I'll do a flame with a small little pedestal that will sit within there rather than the sphere. A nice yellow flame will accent all the yellows in that bottle stopper. Maybe a red stem or something. I'm using my skew, so I'm above center. No dust mask because my voice might be a little muffled when I talk. But if I was turning alone and not doing a demo, I would definitely wear a full respirator. But in my demos, I do not, just because it's a little more muffled and harder to hear. Might not be hard to hear, but more muffled for people who may be hard of hearing. So for the most part, I hold my breath, okay? No, I'm just joking. I don't hold my breath. You don't want to pass out on the lathe. Now that's a little out of round. Oh, sorry. I thought I might have saw something in the chat there. Make
No,
that.
I didn't answer.
Oh, that must be for someone else. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is a planing cut to true this up. It's a little out of round. And now you can see those nice slicing ribbons I'm getting with a piece of wood that is not mostly glue. Yeah, so here I'll do a little flame, a bead, pedestal, and my tongue. Okay. I could have marked those with a pencil. Now with a flame, 1/3, 2/3. There. Now we have rough shape of our flame. Actually, I'll switch to this camera angle as well. Now I'll reduce this so it's a smaller bead. Reduce all of this. There we are. There's our bead. There's our flame. Here, I'm actually going to grab this here. And it'll actually show that a little better. There we are. There we are. There's our bead. There's our flame. There. Now I have my pedestal. One thing I need to measure first is the size of my hole and what size tenon I need to fill this mortise. Okay. So my hole is, well, I knew that, 3/16. So there's my hole. My pedestal needs to be above that. So that's actually going to be higher than I expected, which is okay. There we are, and we'll start it up here. Okay. And that's 5/8. So I have a perfect collar here. So my plug is actually going to be down here further. So that's perfect. And I can make that with a parting tool. And I want that to be 3/8 of an inch. But if I went too far here, that's okay. I can leave a little shim back here that will be at the proper diameter of 5/8 there. So it fits snug within my finial. And I'm actually perfect here. I just need to go a little further. And I have a small chip. I need to move this so I can get this in here. Because I had a small little chip out when I broke through with my parting tool. So I'm just refining that at the connecting joint there. Now it looks pretty good. One more pass. There we are. And this needs to go a little bit more. I'll double check that guy, and maybe a 64th above 5/16, so I need to go a little bit more. Now we want this to fit snug. There we are, 5/8 perfectly. All right, so now I would color it. So let me see. I gotta grab my yellow. Grab my paint brushes here. So I'll do the yellow first. Now these are stains, so you have to be accurate with your paintbrush so they don't bleed everywhere else you don't want the stain. Okay, there's my flame. I'll take a tiny bit of red. And I think we'll make that tiny little bead red. And then I'll take, let me see, my black. And I do the lighter colors first, because if it bleeds over into something different, the darker color will sort of cover that up. Now I'm turning this with my hand. I don't want to turn it on because I don't want to be speckled black. I just got to dry my paintbrushes off here on my work pants. That's all right. I do the laundry. Otherwise, I might hear about it. Now all I need to do is part that off. But just let that spin for a little bit because you don't want to be colored black, red, and yellow when I catch that as it flies off the lathe. So we'll just let that spin for a second. And there we are. That should be good. And I'll grab my thin kerf parting tool. Part through here. Switch one-handed, reach around the chuck. And catch it as it comes off. Watching out for any spinning pieces of metal. There. Now my lathe is off, and I can take my face shield off. All I need to do now is assemble my bottle stopper. There we have it. There is our bottle stopper. Now I would glue that with, what would I glue that with? I'd glue that with Type on 3. There it is. It came in. It came. Yeah. Type on 3. And where's my bottle stopper? I'll just make sure this fits. Now it might be tight at first, so you might need to thread it and unthread it and thread it and unthread it. Now I'm going to hold that piece with this so my hands don't make those bright colors dull. There we go. Grab this little guy, and I'll get that off again, and then we should be off to the races. Sorry about that. Hope it wasn't too loud in the mic. I can actually tighten it with this, and I'll throw glue in the other way. There we have it. And now our hardware is flush, sitting straight and flat. There's our nice vibrant bottle stopper. And all I need to do is now glue this in place. There we have it.
That is one nice piece of work, and you did a fantastic demonstration, sir.
It looks great.
Fabulous.
Very good.
That's a really good demo, Kate.
I love the colors.
Thanks, me too. I love those colors too. I'll have to maybe get a couple more of those.